the recording now. So just so that you know, and we'll kick it off. So thanks for coming back for day 2. Today we have another jam-packed session and we'll wrap it up for agents today. Hopefully everybody got the email from, I think I sent it this morning, that has the replay and all the files that we walked through yesterday. If you have any questions, we can talk through those today here in just a second. I did make a couple of changes to the outline, so I kind of wanted to share with you what that was. Because of some of the things that we talked about yesterday and that I wanted to expand on today, I went ahead and took out this 113th Street case study, and I moved the Eastern Court one because there's so much to talk about there to the end. So if anybody needs to go, they can go, but know that it'll be there once we get through everything. So, and then tomorrow, Debbie, you were asking about this. So tomorrow we're really talking about limiting your liability, which was one of the questions that you asked today that we'll cover in just a second. Deploying and managing the program, which also includes how to create your own fund. So it's going to help you determine how maybe you could talk to your broker, or how some of the brokers here can create a fund within their brokerage to utilize as a way to attract and retain client or agents, and to get more listings through the brokerage as well. And then it's about how to approve projects. So we instituted kind of a process here to approve projects, because as you'll see when we walk through this, it's really not hard to build the pipeline, but it's really hard to manage said pipeline. So there's kind of a way that we've instituted to approve projects as agents are bringing them in. So that's what tomorrow is. So feel free, if you wanted to attend that session, I can send you the link to register for it. And otherwise, feel free to ask any questions. So I thought I would start with a question that was asked. Debbie asked this question this morning about insurance and liability. So on the issue of insurance, as an agent invoicing as an LLC of your own, you really need to have general liability insurance coverage with a minimum aggregate payout of $1 million. So I recommend more, frankly, but that's really kind of the minimum. And having said that, you really do need to speak with your broker, because if you are an unfortunate party to a lawsuit, their E&O insurance is going to come into play as well. So you want to make sure that you're covered for your LLC, but then, your broker is aware that you're buying insurance to cover some of these activities, and that, you kind of coincide and talk about those different coverages and what they will cover and what you would need to. As far as contractors, which was the other part of that question, we have them certify in their agreement that we're going to walk through today. We have them certify that they're insured, but it's always good to ask for their certificate of insurance as well for your records. Were there any other questions from yesterday? Anybody has? Cool. Okay. All righty. So this first part of today's session is really going to be about how do you find contractors, and what do you do with them once you find them, and how do you kind of come to an agreement on what they're going to do, how they're going to get paid, and all of that. So really at the beginning, I just kind of wanted to focus on how do you actually find really good contractors. I mean, this is probably one of the hardest parts of this process, is not only just estimating renovations, but also finding good people that you can trust and rely on throughout the process to help you and your clients. And so I found really 4 good ways to find reputable contractors. And I highly recommend, even if you're not an investor yourself, to join as many local real estate investment groups as you can. In those groups, investors share the good, bad, and the ugly side of the contracting work, and you can get a pretty fast feel for who's respected and who does ethical work and who doesn't. I've been pleasantly surprised with how quickly other contractors will out their competitors if they're screwing up. But also I found really kind of a neat thing is that quite a few of them recommend each other. And that's kind of the 4th one is referrals from other contractors. They recommend each other. They know who they like to work with and whatnot. Referrals from agents is another really good way to find quality contractors. I only ask that they only refer to me contractors that they themselves have actually worked with. I don't want to get their vendor list of everybody who's paid to be part of their list or whatever that is. I want to work with people who actually have experience and can speak from experience on those folks. Another really great way to get them is referrals from your sphere of influence. It's a really good way to find diamonds in the rough. Contractors and real estate investment groups are sometimes pretty busy, so your database can provide you with quality contractors that you may not have heard of. Maybe they're a couple, two-man crew, for example. So asking your database has the added advantage of you're getting in front of your people and letting them know that you offer this program and you have a reason to reach out and touch them as well. And then, as I mentioned, referrals from other contractors are very helpful, especially if you're not going to hire a general contractor, a GC. And if you want to make sure everyone plays well in the sandbox, they know who they work with well, who they respect, and who they think would be a good fit for the job. So don't be afraid to ask them. And then I keep kind of a spreadsheet of local contractors that I've worked with and that have been referred to me. I also keep notes on my experiences with them so that I don't accidentally hire someone that was bad ever again. But this list is also helpful when clients are asking for references as well. Any questions about that? I put a couple of examples in here of one of my requests and then some other requests too. People are very quick to recommend folks that they, have enjoyed working with.
So I have a question. So on your Facebook groups, when you're looking for them, is there a certain, because I didn't think about looking for actual groups, is there a certain group that you look for those contractors?
Yeah, so I found that if you look at any kind of real estate investing meetup group in your local market, so like for instance, in Kansas City, there's a pretty big group here that meets relatively regularly, and it's called the Bridge Real Estate Investing Meetup. So I joined their group, then just really any real estate investment group that's local to your area. And I think you'd be surprised. There are quite a few.
Okay.
There's also the Real Estate Association of Real Estate Investors that you can check into as well. They have local groups in your market. They also have that meet regularly right now through Zoom, but they also have their little like mastermind and referral groups as well. And so those are great places to find good contractors. And you get to, there's tons of stuff in there, from how to, replumb something, how to fix, any kind of woodworking issue, whatever. There's tons of stuff in there, but they often will be really good about recommending other people.
I never thought about that. Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, this one's a big one. So every contractor that I work with is required to sign an agreement with me, and this helps ensure that we're all on the same page about our arrangement, the requirements, how they're going to get paid, when, and even how they can earn bonuses. There's a section of the agreement for a lien release as well, and that's a lien release against me and my companies as well as my owner. There's a requirement and promise to notify me if they discover anything they think isn't right or should be investigated further. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday, where we're licensed real estate agents and we're doing the renovation. So anything that is discovered, we have to disclose. And we're not really there all the time, so we don't see every single thing that's going on in the house. So it's really important that our contractors know they have got to tell us if they come across something that they think wasn't done right, could be a problem, a leak, whatever it is. And then I also have that same arbitration agreement and the hold harmless statements that I used in the program agreement with the homeowner. And finally, what happens if either of us decides to walk away from the agreement? I have had some contractors refuse to sign it, and unfortunately, they go on my do not hire list. I've had some contractors want to make modifications or additions, and those we send to the attorney to make. So if they say, hey, they send me a red line back and they've changed something in it, I'm sending it to my lawyer just to make sure we're good. We don't have any issues with what they've changed, or, if it needs to be a conversation about why they made the change, what they're concerned about, and we do that too. And this helps ensure that whatever extra agreements we make are totally legal and protected. So let me back up and I'll open it so you can see what it looks like. So it looks very similar to the program agreement we walked through yesterday that we used with a homeowner. In the beginning, it talks about who the agreement's with and that it's between me, both of my LLCs, because I also own my own brokerage, so I want to protect both, and the contractor and any subcontractors that they may hire. We also talk through no other agreement, whether it's email, text, or verbal, can supersede this agreement unless we have a modification, something that's in writing and that we've both signed. What else here? Oh, and they have to understand that they may not be the only contractor that we hire. If I'm working with a GC, which I have worked with on a couple of projects now, especially these larger ones, then I really kind of leave it on them. They can hire whoever they feel is appropriate for the job. And I've kind of like a little bit of a hands off there, but more often than not, it's smaller jobs and I'm hiring a direct person. So I'm hiring a plumbing person, an electrician person, a roofing person, whatever it is. So they need to know that there are other people involved, that they're not getting the whole thing. And you can modify that if you need to. I would highly recommend having your attorney review any documents you're having people sign. We also have the same sort of scope. I mentioned this yesterday when we were talking, that the contractor has to understand that I, as the provider, that I'm the client. And that any questions or concerns or requests that they have, they need to make them of me and not of the owner. And we have that conversation pretty early on. We're also, the project is being performed in an effort to increase the owner's property value. So they have to understand that ultimately this isn't something somebody's going to live in. It's something that needs, to be done well, correctly, and we're disclosing anything that we're finding, and that it's, in an attempt to sell the property. We also put the scope in here. So if they've given me a written estimate or a bid or anything really, then I will attach that as an amendment, or I'll retype it in here so that it's very clear, all in one place, what we're talking about. The provider understands contractor may subcontract some of the indicated reservation or renovations, but they certify that they and any subcontractors that they might hire have at least $1 million in general liability insurance, and that's in good standing. We also ask that they make sure that all the contractors are properly and actively licensed in their respective trades. Same kind of engagement period, same kind of estimated timelines. We all know that sometimes things happen in pandemics, for example, weather, whatever it might be, that may change the timeline. But I have added this, and I've noticed that it's helped get things done on time. We do a bonus for on-time completion. So we will pay a one-time bonus to the contractor, a certain percentage of the labor only. So they don't get to get a bonus on material. That's just the labor portion of their invoice if they complete the project within the time frame that they've committed to. If they aren't able to do it, whether because of weather or whatever it might be, they don't get the bonus. So it's kind of an incentive to sort of create some ownership, especially when you're working with individual contractors, to make sure things get done on time, and that we're talking about it if we're not. I also make sure they understand that they have to fill out a W-9, and that I am going to issue a 1099 at the end of the year, and that it will be for anything that was paid to the contractor, whether it be for labor or material. They're, can go through their accounting process to deduct the materials that they've paid for out of those funds, but anything I've paid to them directly, they're getting 1099 for. Let's see. So this is kind of one of the strategies that I picked up from a couple of people that I've worked with in the past, and it's actually worked really, really well. I kind of try to find contractors that are willing to work with me on payment. One of the ways that I fund the projects is personally. I personally fund some of these projects. And because of that, I don't always want to pay that invoice right away. I would love to have a little bit of delay so that maybe as I'm getting paid at closing for the renovation expense, I can then pay the contractor at that point and I'm not out any funds up front. But I also know everybody needs to manage their cash flow the way they need to manage their cash flow. And if it's not something that I can take on from a budget perspective, I've got some other ways we'll talk about on how you can fund the renovation that don't come directly out of your pocket. But regardless, having that little bit of a delay is really helpful. So we've got this section in here that allows a contractor to select how they want to get paid. And I bonus them for delays in payment. So if they're willing to wait 30 days after they invoice me, then I'm going to bonus them on 10% of the labor. If they're willing to wait until the closing, I'll bonus them 35% on the labor. And that really helps me manage my cash flow, but it helps them as well. Any questions about that?
Yes, I was wondering, when do they invoice you? Is it when they complete the work or?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways we do it. Sometimes we'll do it in phases. So if I'm working with a GC, for example, they're going to have multiple phases at which they need to pull material and they need to bring on subcontractors. So usually you're going to pay in advance for any material, and then we'll do it by phase. So if we're focusing on flooring, then I'm going to pay them material up front, and then they invoice me at the completion of that phase. And when I say completion, it's got to be reviewed and agreed that we're done, that they've completed everything I've asked them to do, and then they'll invoice. So if they're willing to wait until closing, I will bonus them 35% on just the labor if they'll wait to get paid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sometimes if it's a smaller project and I'm, working with multiple contractors, it's really on their schedule. I don't press them to invoice me. I don't, when we say that we're done, if they invoice me right away, great. If they wait a week or two to invoice me, it doesn't hurt me any, so whatever. But it just kind of depends on their schedule too.
Okay.
Okay, so Teresa, you asked, can you go into the bonus and delayed payment structure? Yeah, so net 30 is 10% of labor. So let's say that the total invoice with labor and material, labor portion of it is, $1,500, or let's just say $1,000 for easy math, because I suck at math. Then I'm going to bonus them $100 if they'll wait to get paid 30 days. If they wait 60 days, they get $200. If they wait till closing, I'm going to give them an extra $350 just for the fact that they're waiting. And I appreciate that because that helps me manage my finances and the brokerage finances a lot easier. Any more questions about that? Okay.
I have a question. It's not about that. In the beginning of the contract where you list your LLC and the brokerage LLC, for us that don't have a brokerage, do we list the brokerage that we work for there to protect them?
That is an excellent question. I would not, so let me back up and say, any agreements that you're having someone sign as part of your renovation program, or if you're doing something completely different, but you're writing contractual agreements with any individual, you need to have the buy-in of your broker. So I would definitely have them review it. I'm doing this because I own both and I don't want to pierce any veils. They may ask you to include them. It's not a requirement. And I would hesitate to add them because then you're mixing insurance liability and so on as well. So it would require a much larger conversation if I didn't have my own brokerage and was working for someone else. We'd need to sit down with both attorneys and figure out how do we make this work, and if it's even something they would support, which is one of the reasons why I created my own brokerage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So Full of Hands is me, and then Royal Fox is obviously the brokerage. Stacy, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, okay. So when you're writing this up, do you have somewhere in there where you're putting an estimated, is there a cost? Because I know when I did one of my bigger ones, we agreed on an amount, and then at the end, he was like, oh, well, it's actually going to be this because I had to do this and this and this and this. And I was like, well, that's not what we agreed upon. And he was like, well, I'm not going to finish it until So I kind of feel like it was in a catch-22 and we were already behind. But I was just wondering, is there somewhere in the contract that states, this is the amount? I guess you really don't as you go, but what would you do in that case?
So I typically require change orders. So if you think about a new build process that you go through with a client, and anytime they make an adjustment, they want to add some really cool new light fixture or 10 extra outlets in their bedroom or whatever it is, they have to do a change order process. I require the same thing of the contractor. So I attach their estimate to this, and we all understand it's an estimate, and I tell them up front, and I haven't added it in here. I haven't needed to, but I should. It's a really good point. As long as it's within 10%, then they have discretion there. I understand that, materials might have gone up since we did the estimate. I understand that they may not be able to hire their regular guy and they have to hire someone else. And so I leave them about 10% room. Anything that changes our estimate more than 10%, I have to have a written change order, and we have to agree to it
Okay.
before the work ever even gets started. When I talk about Eastern Court, that actually became an issue because the contractor was not maintaining the timeline that we had agreed to, and was only sending one person over to do the work of a 2,600 square foot house. And it ended up, after 7 days, I had to let him go because he wasn't keeping up with our schedule. So there's a process in there for canceling, and then any kind of disputes have to go through this arbitration process. But really kind of instituting that change order process, I think, would be super helpful. And that's
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another, I think I've talked about this probably 3 or 4 times, and I keep coming back to it because it's just so important. I added a section into our agreements with our contractors so that they understand why we need to know, and they understand what they need to tell us, and that I'd much rather them tell me, even if they're not really sure, that they think something might be wrong, or they think something might be a little off, so that I can investigate it further. And then if it's not something that's really an adverse defect, it's not a material defect to the property, and we decide not to fix it, I'm also holding them harmless from the results of that. So if they let me know, for instance, that a junction box isn't covered, well, in all technicality, should it be? If someone can touch it, yes. If it's up in an attic, in a rafter, I don't really care. But if someone did accidentally go up there and touch it and got electrocuted, then I don't want them thinking that's on them. So I do add this whole disclosure piece here as well, so that they understand why it's important. The lien waiver section of this agreement is super duper important. I have them do this lien waiver / release upfront, so that they understand that any kind of disputes we have about what work was done and what money is owed is between them and me, and that they're not going to file a lien on the property that's going to jack up my homeowner, or they're not going to file a lien against me. And that goes into our arbitration agreement and what we do if we can't come to an agreement on what's transpired. Some people do this as a completely separate document. I don't have a problem with that. If someone has a much more detailed lien waiver and release form that they want their contractors to fill out, use that and reference it here. But I like to have at least something in here so that they understand, I'm not authorizing them to place a lien on a property. They're releasing that from the get-go. And then the same thing with the arbitration agreement that we had in the program agreement, as well as the hold harmless. What does change is this cancellation agreement. So if the contractor decides to walk away, and they have to notify me in writing. If I have prepaid for any material or costs that have not been spent yet, they owe that back to me. I have to be paid back in full. Any kind of payment that is outstanding from me, I agree to pay within 5 calendar days, assuming that we have reviewed and have come to an agreement on what that payment is. And so I've had, for example, on Eastern Court, I had to fire that contractor after 7 days. I had already prepaid him for all the flooring, prepaid him for the dumpster that hadn't been ordered yet, and prepaid him for a portion of the labor. And I don't pay everything up front, but I prepaid like 50% of the labor. So when I canceled this agreement with him, he tried to invoice me additional monies because he didn't want to lose the money I'd already prepaid him. So we ended up having to arbitrate, and he ended up losing, but I kind of walked away from half of the money that he owed me. That was kind of what we did as part of that arbitration agreement. But this sort of further hits home that there is a process that we are going to follow if in fact we have to go through any kind of cancellation and there's any dispute over money. Alejandra, did you have an attorney write up your agreements and what was the cost? Yes. So I have an attorney on retainer for the brokerage that I also use personally. I used him personally in business agreements, and then for my own LLC that then he also represents some work for the brokerage. So I pay him a retainer to do that. It's not really a ton. It's like $250 a month. And he reviews all of my legal agreements, all of my contracts, everything. You can utilize a one-time service, like hire a local business or real estate specific attorney to help you with these things. Have them review and make any modifications that you need to make. But someone who's state specific is really important. Does that answer your question? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions about the contractor agreement? Okay. It will be in the files. Where did my stupid window go that I send you? Go back here. Okay. Okay. I accidentally hit something. I'm sorry. Funding the renovation. So this one is probably the next biggest question that I get. Who's going to pay for this? So there's quite a few ways to get this done. Obviously the easiest one is you can fund it if you have the money to do so. It definitely gives you the greatest flexibility and freedom, but if you don't have the cash and that's a roadblock, there are a couple of other opportunities. One of which is your brokerage. So I actually created this as part of my brokerage. We have a fund that our agents can utilize to renovate their clients' homes. But it is an opportunity to partner with your broker to create a fund for the brokerage. Tout all the ways you can help sellers, garner more publicity for the brokerage, attract and retain other agents, provide a key service that frankly not very many people are doing at all. The third one would be your friends and family. See if you can pull together a few folks who maybe want to earn 10% for loaning you the money with a return in like 90 to 120 days. Make sure you have an agreement with them on how you're going to pay back the loan and when. But it's kind of a nice way to get people involved in your support your success. And it's a way that you're not, funding it 100% yourself. A passive investor, someone who doesn't really want to be involved in the day-to-day, but maybe has some cash laying around collecting dust. Partnering with them to provide the funding for a return on their investment as well. Think of things like other agents who maybe have some extra cash that they want to invest. Maybe agents that have gone into referral status, friends, family I mentioned before, even plain old investors who are intrigued by the uniqueness of the program, but maybe don't want to fund like the entire $25,000 or $30,000. Maybe they just want to give you $5,000 and you're going to give them 10%, 20%, whatever you work out once you actually close the deal. On one project, because it was so large, I did have an active investor and partner, someone who wants to share your vision, be involved with the planning or the management of the project, someone who has a passion for interior design, maybe that has some cash to invest in your program itself, getting them involved. He was actually really great. He helped me. He comes from a property management, like a commercial property management side of the business. And when we sat down and walked through kind of what I was doing and how I was approaching the renovations and the vision around the design, he was like, why aren't you creating like packages of fixtures and colors and things like that, of tile and things that you always use so that you can buy them in bulk? Why aren't you doing something like that? Like, that's a really interesting, maybe we could do that, if we get maybe a little bit more institutional, we could do something like that. So as someone who wanted to be participatory in the process, very optimal time to bring someone in, frankly. And then people kind of laugh at me sometimes. You're contractors. So by doing delayed payments, to closing, or even donating of their services. So on Eastern Court, which is one of the ones we'll go through today, the stager donated a portion of the staging services in so and I advertised her business as well. So if people think like stagers, photographers, your cleaning crews, they can all contribute and receive quite a bit of publicity in return. So I actually created a page on my website where I showcase those sponsors, and then I mention and tag them in every post I make about the project. So there's lots of options here on how you could fund it. You just have to be a little bit more creative. You don't have to eat all the cost yourself. Any questions about that?
So the stager, I'm assuming she gave you a reduced rate for her services? And then the return was that, or what you did was you promoted her services every time you did the post?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
okay, gotcha.
yeah. So
it's not like they're making a piece of what you're making, right? It's just you're promoting their services.
Right.
Okay.
So her typical staging agreements are for 60 days. And so she charges based on square footage that she's staging and how many pieces she needs to pull. So for Eastern Court, for example, she pulled, I think it was about $2,000 worth of staging for 60 days and only ended up charging me $1,000 and gave me, $1,000 credit essentially for me advertising her company as part of my part of that particular renovation. And then she made my list of partners as well. So people who visited my website could see she was one of the stagers that I utilized. She wasn't an exclusive either. So I have a couple that I use, but it was a way to reduce my cost, make it a little bit more profitable for me, be able to advertise another local company and build that relationship.
Yeah, no, that's great.
What's that? I'm gonna mute because I'm gonna cough really quick. Excuse me. So let's focus on how you actually get paid. So I mentioned yesterday that there's definitely some challenges that I stumbled across in one of these larger renovations that I did not know about ahead of time. So we're gonna actually walk through that in pretty good detail. I really wanted to dig into the intricacies of how you could get paid because there are multiple ways and each has their own benefits and their own detractors. At the top, I highlighted that there are several ways that you can get paid, whether it's on the renovation plus a management fee, whatever you think is appropriate. I actually charge 15%. You should be including your commission from the listing itself, and you should be asking your sponsors, like your cleaner, stager, photographer, et cetera, if they'll accept advertisement in lieu of cash payment or some combination thereof. So you can get paid up front by the homeowner, for example. I've done this on one project where the homeowner really had the money to pay for the renovation themselves, but they didn't have the vision. They didn't really want to mess with it. They didn't want to deal with it. They just wanted the person who was actually going to be ending up listing and selling their home and marketing it to do that for them. So they paid for the full renovation in the stages, just like I would normally do with any kind of, contractor. And they paid for it themselves. And then we listed it and sold it. So that's an option too. Invoicing from your LLC. So this is one that we talked a little bit about yesterday. And this is the renovation expense and the management fee is directly invoiced to closing outside of your listing commission. And when I say outside of, I mean on top of. But the key part about that is that they're separate. So your LLC is invoicing to title, to closing, to get paid. And then you have your regular listing commission that's getting paid. And those two events are separate from one another. And I say that in the sense that, from a technical perspective, they're separate, but you still have to talk to your broker and make sure that they're okay with you doing it that way. The third one is increased commission. So this works really well for small projects. And I'm going to walk through a couple different examples here. But if you do have, maybe it's only you're going to paint the exterior, or maybe landscape, you're just going to work on curb appeal. Maybe they're already doing the interior stuff, whatever that combination looks like, it's going to be a small project for you. There's really no reason to go through the effort of invoicing through your LLC and going through that process when you could just increase your commission by 1% or 2% to cover that cost. And then lastly, the hybrid invoice and commission approach. This is what we kind of talked about yesterday, and we're going to go through that in the next slide. Let's just go ahead and go there. So I've included the document as part of the files you'll get today, but there is a maximum expense associated with commission when the buyer is using a federally backed program. So Alejandra, you weren't here yesterday, and I don't think you've had a chance to listen to the whole thing yet, but for some strange reason, the federal government will limit how much a seller can pay you in commission on your listing if their buyer is utilizing an FHA, USDA, or VA loan, and they max it out at 8%. So in a situation where you have a max, a sales price of $250,000, the maximum commission that is allowed on the HUD is 8%. And that comes out to be $20,000. So if you're splitting that between you and the selling agent, maybe, and I'm only just using these for example purposes, but maybe it's 2.5% to the selling agent and the 5.5% goes to you. And that's, $13,750. But your renovation expense was $25,000. So your commission is going to be $13,750 doing it this way. And after let's say you have an 80-20 split with your brokerage, you're going to see 11,000 of that. You're going to have to invoice to closing to title for the remainder. And that 14,000 is what that invoice would be. So less your split with your brokerage, the rest of it is being invoiced. You have to talk to your broker about doing that. That's how we do it. But you have to talk to your broker to make sure they're okay with that, because technically any money you're making off of a HUD, the broker is entitled to. So you have to come to that agreement ahead of time. So I've included this document so that you'll have it, because there's a lot of information in there, some things I had never heard of before. And it was so strange to stumble across this. It was a VA loan. The buyer's maximum or the seller's maximum contribution in terms of commission was less than half of what the seller owed me for my renovation. So I ended up having to invoice the rest. And it was a very, very painful couple of days to make that happen. The hard part is that you can't really decide this up front, because you don't know whether or not you're going to have an FHA, VA, or USDA buyer on the other side of the deal until you actually get the offer. So I typically will set it up with my sellers ahead of time so that they know this is what the renovation is expected to cost. This is how we're structuring it right now. We may have to change that depending on what type of loan program the buyer is using. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. I'm not going to, there's no magic money moving around here, but we may have to change how we structure the deal on the backside once we actually get under contract. And also the one thing to keep in mind, that 8% is total, actually total. So that includes the selling agent or the buyer's agent's commission.
So which method do you use, or you use all of them?
So it depends on the project. If it is going to, if I can take my typical, and I typically charge 3% as a base. If I'm going to utilize commission to cover the renovation expense because it's not a bunch, and I can jack it up at 1% or 2%, and that's going to cover my costs, then that's the direction I'll go. If a project turns into a bigger project because we found something or things have come up and it just necessitates being a larger budget, then we'll move to a hybrid approach, because I've already committed to a certain commission amount in the listing agreement. And now I'm adding to it. So I'll do the hybrid approach. My preference though, is to do the invoice. To do an invoice only is basically, they're two completely separate things. I have my listing commission that comes out of, from the listing agreement, and then my renovation expense is completely separate, plus my management fee. And I also include any cleaning, photography, and staging in that as well. So that whole renovation expense is all of it. I like to invoice that separately. I kind of went back and forth on that in the beginning, because I felt like I'm exposing the costs, the flat costs of the renovation to the owner, which in one case made them feel like they had more control over what I was going to spend. When we agreed at the outset that I was going to spend $28,000, and then we ended up only spending 25, they felt like they had more say in where I spent the money. And so that became a challenge. So that actually became something we talked about early on, and that this is the vision. I'm walking you through how I want to renovate your home and what I want to do to it and how I want it to look. Obviously not taking into account any ahas we might stumble across once we start opening up walls or pulling up floors or things like that. This is where I want to be. This is how I'm going to spend the money. I have them sign off on the vision. But then after that, if I end up saving money, then they benefit from that, right? So if we get less material, materials that don't cost as much, or labor goes down for some reason, the guy gets his favorite person back that doesn't charge him as much, and we're able to take a cost savings, they get to feel that too. I don't just eat that money, or keep it, I guess I should say. But that works both ways. If we do uncover something that has to be done and I've got to scale back in other areas to take care of this issue that we discovered, and it ends up being more than my original estimate, I don't do it till I've sat down with them and I've walked them through, here's what happened. Here's where we're going to pull some money from to cover it. But now our estimate is about $4,000 more than what we expected. So I need your approval to raise that up to that $4,000 to cover that expense. So it's a consistent conversation that we have about it, which can be painful. It can be contentious and painful. And if you're not explaining it very well, can introduce a lot, some distrust. So I like to have the contractor there with me whenever I'm walking through something like that to help justify why we're doing that. So I prefer to do the invoice because it keeps things very nice and separate and clean for me. But it does kind of invite a lot more involvement from the homeowner in the expense side of things, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about that? It's a lot. I kind of put in here two different scenarios. So, if you're going to do an invoice only, for instance, a lot of times I'll take less commission on the listing side to cover, basically my brokerage now and the brokerage that I was with before has a minimum amount of commission that has to be earned on every property that's sold through the brokerage. So I like to make sure at least something is coming into the brokerage. But I do actually reduce my commission usually if I'm going to do this invoice only thing so that they're not, feeling the burn of all of it, especially if it's a pretty big project. But you don't have to do that. So there are some other considerations that I like to call out related to getting paid that you should consider. For example, the sheer marketing and lead generation that I do on social media and in the neighborhood outreach tactics and farming generates listings that don't actually need any renovation at all. So we list those and sell them pretty quickly. And I kind of consider those bonus listings. So these bonus listings usually lead to more referrals and opportunities to advertise. So while you may make good money on some renovation program listings and lose money on others, you'll actually come out ahead in the long run. The most important thing about that is to just keep track of your numbers and know where your referrals are coming from, what advertisements or posts generated that listing, so that when you sit down each quarter to evaluate, which is when I do it, you'll know where to spend your time and what to have heartache over. So that's actually, when you can sit down and look at, in the grand scheme of things, yes, I got 2 renovation listings. One of them I made money on through my management fee. And my homeowner was super happy. The other one I kind of lost a little bit of money on because of whatever, transpired. They couldn't afford the increase in the renovation, so I ate it. But I got 5 new bonus listings that I wasn't expecting that didn't need any renovation work. That kind of all melds into sort of a total pot, if you will. So while I'm keeping track of what I'm spending and what I set out to spend on every renovation, I'm not looking at it as a win or a loss on each and every one individually. Does that make sense? So it really is kind of a long game and a relationship investment, both in the clients you serve, but also in the neighborhoods you're helping and the partnerships that you're creating. Ultimately, you're creating a name for yourself as an expert and go-to person in your local market with these types of opportunities. So it's kind of a longer game and much more intense, but definitely a lot more opportunity for sure. So when we talk about lead generation, I do most of my lead generation from Facebook ads. I grew a ridiculous pipeline of prospective projects by spending only about $150 on Facebook ads, and I'll show them to you on the next slide. But you should also consider posting in Facebook groups and on TikTok, believe it or not. People love to see transformation videos. They want to see that before and after. It's probably the easiest way to sell your services in this regard. And then if you don't have your own before and afters to use in your advertising, let me know. I've got a couple that you can start with, at least to start generating some leads. And then PR and marketing, especially after you have a win or two. You can create press releases, are pretty easy to do, and self-publish on the wire. You can send email marketing campaigns to your sphere of influence, local HOAs, chambers of commerce. Let people know you're looking for new projects, even if you're really not. Build the pipeline. Networking is a really great way to get sort of that longer lead pipeline going. A great option is other agents in your market. So as you can see, this is, it's a pretty intense process to do this program, but because you're standing out in your market and you're going after it, other agents are going to refer business to you in your market because they don't know how to do it. They don't want to do it. They're afraid of it or whatever it might be. So it's a really good way to get referrals in as well and, pay smaller referral fees, for example. Farming is another great way. Finding blighted neighborhoods or homes in up and coming neighborhoods that need some love. Farm the neighborhoods you live in or near, just getting the word out. The business doesn't have a hard time finding you. Any questions about how that lead generation process works? I have found that the magic words are $10,000 to $5,000 or less. I tried a couple, and there are a couple of other agents in other markets that use 20, 25, 30, 35,000. The people that are looking for someone to spend that much money on their project are very, very, very large projects. I've found that if you use $10,000 to $15,000 as your maximum, you say, I will pay up to $10,000 of my own money to renovate your home to help you sell it. That is a much easier generation of conversation right out of the gate than using really big numbers. I found carousel ads. So if you're not familiar with Facebook advertising, there's a couple of different ways you can set your ad up. You can do just a bunch of images like this one here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this one here is just 18 images of befores and afters. This one is one before and after, but it's a send a message. And then the one I use is actually a carousel. So I've got a before and after, and there's usually, I think, about 10 before and afters that people can scroll through. But anytime they click this ad, it opens up in Messenger. That does irritate some people, but for the most part, people are pretty receptive and they are like, oh gosh, oh, well, while I have you, they reach out and will, offer up some interesting tidbits. For example, I've got one over here. I know they're hard to see, but this one says, just saw your remodel offer. Never heard of that before. Seems like a darn fine idea. Hope it works out well for you and homeowners. One thing to keep in mind, you're always going to have the naysayers. You're always going to have the people that, don't believe that you're doing the right thing, that you're putting your license in jeopardy, that you're, providing inducements. And that's simply not the case. I've put my response here because it's something that, you definitely want to have as a copy paste that you can use, because believe me, they crawl out of the woodwork. It's a service that's no different than any other service that you provide, like photography and staging and even marketing that you do for a listing, but you have to be prepared for it. People are going to start thinking that you're trying to induce people into, sellers into working with you. And that's not what's happening. You're just making it easier for them to work with you. Any questions about that?
How many, because I know I tried this before and I didn't have a lot of luck. How many people did you get from your ad?
So that $150 that I spent over the course of about 30 days, I had over 100 people reach out to me
Oh, wow.
asking questions. Out of that, probably 30 of them really had some level of interest. They, were at least willing to entertain a conversation through Facebook Messenger on it, and were willing to have a dialogue. From that, we had 22 that I actually went and visited. We picked 12 total. And then we went through the process of estimating. A couple of them fell off because of, their projects were either too big, or like the red flags that we walked through yesterday. When I got in there, I was like, this is probably not going to be a good fit for me. And I don't feel like maybe I jive really well with the seller. So I would not take on some projects. So I think out of the 100 people that, actually reached out, I think we ended up securing 8 of those listings.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's still a good conversion.
Yeah. I mean,
that's amazing. Would you be able to share with us maybe like with your ad, who you target, you know what I mean? How you can set
your target.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think that all affects, it's like if we don't set the right audience and the right people to target, then the wrong people are seeing it. So I think that would be very valuable, so we could try and do our own ads.
Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind now, Facebook has changed their advertising policy with anything related to housing. They're super, super, super crazy about it now, which is not the case earlier this spring when we were starting this. So now most of the targeting that I do is based on area. So it's really narrowed down to neighborhoods that I really want to work in, or parts of town that I really like or think I can contribute and add value. But anymore, you can't target based on gender, age, income status. You can't do any of that. Like all the fair housing laws that we have to follow when we're talking to clients are now part of Facebook, and you can't do any kind of targeting like that anymore. But I'll share with you what I do target, so you have at least that.
Okay.
As for Facebook ads. Okay. Any other questions? One other interesting thing I think that has come out of this is that folks don't believe you. 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, you're just pulling the chain. You're just trying to get phone numbers and email addresses. You're not really spending money to renovate other people's houses, or what's the interest on this loan, those kinds of things. You just have to be prepared to have the conversation. And I think anytime you're coming from a position of contribution, that you're really genuinely trying to help sellers out of shitty situations, that's your focus. It's not to make a ton of money. It's to get more listings on the MLS, to get more people into the beautiful homes that have already been renovated, to help your sellers make more money. Like there's so many positive ways that you're helping people that it doesn't have to be, so when you're responding to those kinds of things, just being really positive about why you're doing it. It's super important. So honestly, building the pipeline isn't that hard. Once you actually start advertising and talking about it and showing the results of what you're doing, and even showing the like, oh crap moments where you're like, dang, I thought this faucet was going to fit the sink and it didn't. And I ended up having to take it back. And then I, spent an extra $30. Like even your challenges, people really enjoy hearing too. So don't be afraid to share all the good things that are happening, but also some of the challenges that you're having too. It makes it real and people like seeing that. The biggest thing is the transformations. Even as simple as a change in paint color, people rave about. As simple as, new hardware on kitchen cabinets. You don't have to paint the cabinets, put new hardware on it. Anything like that is super helpful. And I would say always use a spreadsheet. If you have a CRM, use that, but at least keep a spreadsheet of everybody that you're actively talking to, their contact information and what phase they're in. Also keeping track of what they're worried about. Like if they came to you and they're like, oh, what kind of interest rate are you offering on this loan? You want to know that that's somebody who thought maybe that you were, offering some kind of loan and not actually doing a renovation. So just keeping track of that is helpful. I'm going to skip this so we can get to, we're at almost
I-
that time. Huh?
I just wanted to say something quickly. I just finished a total renovation of a hoarder condo. I love hoarders. I'm sorry. I'm
I'll
different.
send them all to
but-
you.
We had to redo the kitchen and both bathrooms. And so you just gave me an idea. I'm going to use the marketing strategy that even in COVID, we got this place ready, because we had to go to like 6 or 7 different locations just to get a stove, because they were all back ordered for weeks and
Yes.
weeks and weeks. And I said, hey, we got to get something going. So the seller agreed to paying more for the stove so we could get it listed.
That's
And
awesome.
so we got it done, but I'm going to use that as a marketing strategy. It says nothing stops me, even COVID, even a silly COVID virus, but everything is on back order. It's ridiculous.
Oh, I know, it's terrible.
Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that was interesting.
No, that is interesting, and definitely a huge opportunity to be, nothing's going to get in your way of helping someone get their home on the market, and look at all the places I had to go in order to just get this one thing,
My contractor had to go, poor thing. He drove.
Make sure
But
he's
he
not
did
charging
it.
you extra trip fees.
He got it. No, he didn't charge me extra. Bless his heart. He just did it.
Oh,
I
that's
think he was
awesome.
getting fed up. I think he was getting fed up with the project. And he
He's one to
wanted it
keep in your
over.
Yeah, he's one to keep in your list if he's willing to go through all that.
I've
That's
used him
awesome.
for about 15 years, and I if I didn't have him, I'd have to shut down my business, because he's just awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good to hear. That's awesome. Yeah, when you get a hold of him, you got to keep him.
Absolutely.
Anybody asks for who your contractor is, you're like, nope, can't tell you. Not giving his name
Well,
out.
if they let me do the project, I'll let him have him. But
Right. Well, yes.
we're a team, so he's part of my
That's
deal.
That's fantastic. Well, I would love for you to join our Facebook group. We're not friends on Facebook right now, so I couldn't invite you, but we have a Facebook group that we kicked off a couple of months ago that we're just really starting to dig into and get some things going. Would love to have some success stories and even your challenges and things that you're finding as you're going through your process, and anyone else too. So definitely make sure to join that.
What is the name of the Facebook group, Jeff?
It's the Renovation Niche. You can just search for Renovation Niche and you'll
Okay.
find the group, but there's the URL right there.
Great. I'll do it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
So if anybody has to drop off, I totally understand. I am going to walk through Eastern Court, which was a huge project, and one of the ones that I learned a ton on. So if you can stay, great. If not, you'll get the video file on the backside, so you'll have all that information. But there was a ton of learning that came out of this one in a number of different ways. And I've got 2 slides on all the things that I learned. So if you want to hang out, definitely do. This one was a 4-bed, 3-bath, super California split. So if you're not familiar with that floor plan, it is actually a 4-story California split. So when you walk in, you have your living room, you go up 1 level, you've got your kitchen and a couple of bedrooms and a bathroom. You go up another level and you're in the master suite, and then the basement level. So it's actually 4 levels. It's a giant pain in the ass. This one was a little bit more than 2,600 square feet, and almost every single surface had to be touched, whether it was scrubbed, painted, carpeted, floored, everything. I mean, it had everything. So I'll show you what it looked like when I got started. So it had, it's actually only 12 years old. The house was built in 2008. They had sort of made it their Phoenix paradise. Alejandra, you'll recognize this color scheme. Lots of Cocopelli throughout also. But the carpet was 12 years old. They had painted either this orangish yellow color or red, which I'll show you in the kitchen in a second, but nothing had been updated. It had, it clearly had been worn. This old ceramic tile was in place as well. Even the ceilings, we had to paint the ceilings even, but this is the kitchen. So it was red walls, dark cabinetry, old laminate countertops. The appliances were pretty disgusting. We actually took them apart and cleaned them. They were pretty nasty. This jetted tub, no one had ever used. So when my cleaner actually started to clean it before we got started, it was pretty nasty. And so we ended up deciding to pull it out, and I'll explain why you don't ever want to do that. The carpeting on the stairs was pretty rundown. It was really, really rough. but it was 12 years old and they hadn't really done much other than the painting of the walls. So when we sat down to kind of walk through what they owed, what the house was worth as it is, what homes in their area were going for, and some of the other challenges that their neighborhood would have as part of this process, we basically came down to that at the end, and I'll get to why that's important. At the end, we discovered that they owed $160,000 on their loan. The as-is value of the home was $180K. After back taxes, which we discovered halfway through also, in addition to a second mortgage, and commission and title fees, they were going to have to come to the table with $7,000 in order to sell this house that's only 12 years old. When we walked through and came up with the plan of how we were going to approach the renovation, we came up with, I think it was $17,000 for total renovation costs, because I had a really great contractor that I was working with at the time who was cutting me some deals, and it was going to be great. This is the one that I had to fire a weekend, and ended up having to hire another contractor. So our total renovation after hiring that second person was $28,000. The after repair value was planned to be $285,000, which meant that the total expense with the loan, the renovation, the commission, back taxes, and title fees, their total cost was going to be $210,000. Keep in mind, I said the after repair value was $285,000. They ended up selling it at $270,000, and we'll get into what happened there. But overall, they made $60,000 off the property. They also made an incredible upgrade. So they went from a $285,000 house to a $450,000 house. That was their purchase. The interesting thing about their neighborhood, though, home prices within a mile radius around their house were it was a kind of a strange neighborhood. So there were a couple properties that, were in this, 250 to 350K range there. And you can't see it here. There was probably about 2% of the properties that were above 350K, which was really kind of astronomical for that area. And those were really new construction and humongous homes. And in our area, Super California splits are like the bottom of the pile in terms of value. Ranches, reverses, 1.5s, kind of all the way down. Super California splits are at the very bottom. So they wanted to list, well, I'll come back to that. So 350, there were only 2%. 250 to 350, we got a little bit better at 22%. 200 to 249, they're about 40%. So it was, kind of in that 200 to 300 price range was the ideal range. So we settled on 285 based on properties. Teresa asked, how far back did you go to pull comps? So I only go back 6 months right now. And I do that because of the demand in our area is so high that homes are selling ridiculously fast. And I get better close-in comp prices at 6 months than if I expand out to a year. If I am having a really hard time finding a Super California split in that 6 months that has some of the renovation work that I want to do, or is at least updated closer to what I wanted to do, then I would have had to have gone out to a year, but we had plenty in that range. So we settled on 285 with 6 months worth of comps. I think we had three comps. So our budget on that property was heavily concentrated on flooring and paint. And then in addition, because of some surprise things, bathrooms ended up costing a little bit of money too. So flooring wise, we did LVP in the living room. We had to recarpet all of the bedrooms, all of the stairs, all of the hallways, closets, the basement, living room, everything. We had to retile every bathroom. So all 3 bathrooms were retiled. They all used the same tile, and that tile was extended to the fireplace as well. We did decide to create an entryway tile feature just to kind of help make the space look a little bit bigger. I also, what I would call over renovated on this one. I don't want to do that again. Interior paint, we had to paint every single surface of this house, including the ceilings, all the trim, all the walls, all the ceilings. There was a lot. A lot of it had to do with the vaulted ceilings on the main floor and in the kitchen area were so tall. No one had ever cleaned any of the windows. No one had ever cleaned out the fans up there. Like there was just dust everywhere. And apparently there was a birthday party at one point. There was soda up there. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. So we ended up having to repaint literally everything. In the kitchen and the living room, we repainted the cabinets. We used that Rust-Oleum cabinet transformations again. The homeowners wanted quartz countertops, so they actually purchased that on their own. We did our normal, what we would have paid for granite countertops. They covered the difference because they had a very specific ask. New backsplash, new cabinetry hardware, and we did a new tile surround on the fireplace, as I mentioned. Then in the master bedroom, we did that really cool feature wall, which I'll show you here in a second as well. In the bathrooms, so both the master bathroom and the main floor bathroom had repairs due to water leaks required on the subfloor. So when we pulled up the tile floor that was there, it became really obvious that the toilet had been leaking into the space between the floors, and the tub had been leaking. There was old grout that hadn't been sealed, and it was disgusting. So we ended up having to pull up the floor, pulled up the subfloor, had to replace the insulation, and we had to completely replace the ceiling underneath that bathroom, both in the garage, which was underneath the master, and in one of the downstairs bedrooms, because that was right below the main floor bathroom. The reason why I said don't ever replace a jetted tub, we had to rerun all new plumbing. So the makeup of this bathroom was that there were two vanities on either side of this jetted tub. Well, the water that was being used for the tub was coming from those faucets. So they actually had to rerun new plumbing up through the floor for my fantastic freestanding tub and floating faucet that I had already paid for and bought at that point, so I couldn't really take it back. It was a $3,000 mistake for sure. We fully tiled the master shower, added new hardware, had a new shower door. On the exterior, we really scaled back after we discovered some of those issues in the bathrooms. So we ended up only painting garage doors, the front door. We added some shrubs. We did have to replace the back door on the back of the house because of some water damage. And then we had to reinforce the deck. I mentioned yesterday when you stepped out on this deck, it started swaying. This was that one. So it just seemed like this, it should have been a bunch of red flags for me walking through the house with a ton of deferred maintenance and a ton of just basic stuff that had to be done in order to bring the house up to renovated value. So here's some photos, the befores and afters. And this time I just did them side by side, so a little easier to see. Before, orange door, brown garage doors, we were going to repaint the trim and everything. We just decided to do the front door. We did a nice blue color, match the cabinetry, and white garage doors just to kind of take the mopey 70s brown color out. This is the difference in the kitchen. So we left the floors, we just had them refinished. This is the quartz countertop that they wanted replaced. And then we painted existing cabinets with that cabinet transformations and replaced the hardware. We had to take apart the microwave and almost take apart the stove in order to clean those out. The ceiling was painted, the not subway tile, this was hex tile for the backsplash was put in. New faucet, new sink. This was the change to the entryway. So we took out this tile, ceramic tile, and we took out all the carpeting, and we put in new LVP and a hex style entryway with grout. This was fun for my flooring guy. He actually didn't charge me all the extra labor because he was really excited about doing it. So we just let him go for it. This is the other half of the living room where that old fireplace tile surround was. We replaced all of that. Again, repainted every surface, including the ceilings. This is the tub that we replaced. We ripped out all the tile on the back side, replaced this jetted tub with the freestanding tub and the floating faucet. It actually is a pedestal from the floor. Repainted the cabinets. When we ripped out these pony walls, we realized that there was no other wall standing here. So we actually had to create new sides for the cabinets. So we weren't expecting to have to do that either. And then, let me see. Yeah. Then we ended up framing the existing mirrors. We did not replace any countertops or any light fixtures in the bathroom, but we did completely retile the master shower with a new door and new hardware. This is the feature wall that we did. It's just wainscoting that we did in the master bedroom and put, painted it a nice different color, new carpet. This is the basement living room, so family room area. Previously, over here where you can see the tile is, they just had like 9 squares. You couldn't even open the door all the way and still be on the tile. So we actually expanded that space so there was a nice entryway, especially considering that that door had to be completely replaced because of all the water damage. They needed a little bit more protection there as well. And then this is just some, I don't know why I have the old, anyway, that's the front of the house and then the back of the house. And we put reinforcements. We were going to put in a whole new deck, but with everything else that came up, we ended up just reinforcing the deck with some brackets that actually made it significantly sturdier. So the painful part of this whole thing was that my normal renovation time frame is 30 to 60 days. This one actually took the full 60 days. And then because of some challenges that we had during our listing period, it took an additional 60 days just to get it under contract. Total time frame was 165 days. And I'll walk you through kind of how that played out. So again, if they would have done it as is, they could have been out of there in 45 to 60 days. And we would have, they would have had to come to table with about $7,000. Waiting an extra 100 days, they were able to walk away with $60,000. So I say there's so many opportunities for learning here. I've kind of put in here what all happened, but basically when we set out with the listing agreement, we agreed to be $285 was what we were going to list the house at when we went live. The seller changed their mind after the renovation because they thought the house looked like all the model homes that they had been walking in. Thus, they wanted to list it at $345. And if we remember when we go back, yeah, I saw your face, Alejandra. Remember when we go back, like there were almost no houses at that price point at all in their area. It was a contentious discussion, but as I've said, I've already poured all this money into it. It was one of the first ones I've done with a stranger, someone I didn't know. And I went ahead and agreed to list at their price for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, they ghosted me for about 30 days. I ended up having to threaten to remove the listing from MLS just to get them to respond to me. They agreed to lower the price by $20,000. So now we're at $325, still way up there. Another ghosted for 2 weeks, threatened to remove it from MLS. They lowered it $10,000, did that again for another 3. It was a mess. We actually received an offer once we got them down to $290. Remember, I wanted to list at $285, and now we're 45 days into this listing, which is just insane for our market. Like that's way longer, way longer than it should have been. We were at $290. We received an offer for $270. We were able to negotiate them up to $285, but that was as far as they were willing to go, and the sellers decided to walk away. So it sat on the market for another 3 weeks. Another offer came in at $270. This time they decided to accept it. Then we found out through title work that they had a second mortgage that didn't show up on the initial title work that we had done, which was not the full process I learned from my title company after the fact. Once they actually went in and did the full title search, they found the second mortgage. So now instead of only owing $120,000, which I didn't tell you about before, now we found out they owed $160,000 because they had done a previous modification. Then we found out they had a tax lien on their house from a business that they had started 8 years earlier, never did anything with, but they had gotten a sales tax license from the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri charges you every 6 months for those things. And they'd racked up quite a nice little bill after all of that. So a couple of things that I learned from this definitely was to warn them up front about loving the renovation on the backside and thinking that it's worth more than what I've set out at, as our goal price point. And really encouraging them to stick with the plan anyway, which, as you know, is relatively difficult when you have, a stubborn seller. But it's definitely something to remember. Do the title search and a lien search, and encourage them to do the full title search and the full lien search to make sure you capture everything that might be added out there. This is the point at which I also added the caveat to the agreement about canceling the contract and then what they would owe me as a result. That did become a very contentious conversation where they threatened to cancel the contract and the listing, and then I wouldn't get paid at all, which is also when I decided to add the language about the lien. So if there is a point at which I'm not getting paid for the renovation that we agreed to, I will actually file a lien on their property. Don't remove jetted tubs. And then frankly, hiring the right contractor the first time, and make sure that you're talking out the agreement and not just jumping into it. And finally, it's really okay to walk away and file the lien. And that's probably what I should have done, but it's beautiful and it's great for advertising now. So there's that. That concludes the case study on Eastern Court. I'm happy to take any questions you have on this and anything we might have covered today. And if you don't have any questions, I really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with me. We've gone an hour and 15 to 20 minutes both days. So good times.
I have a real quick question. I know you said for the contractors, if they finish, within the time frame that you have in the contract, then they get a bonus. Did you mention what the penalty is?
So the penalty, let me pull up that agreement actually. So the penalty is that they don't actually, so they would not get the bonus at all, frankly.
Okay.
And then if the penalty, or if they are not completing on time or within budget because of a mistake that they made, remember we go through this change order process. So if they come back to me later and say, hey, I'm going to have to extend 2 weeks and I need $10,000 more, then that's a conversation we have. We have to agree to that ahead of time, but they automatically forfeit any kind of bonus they would have received as a result of that. Okay. I don't actually have a penalty built in dollar wise into the contract currently. Definitely something that could be added though.
Okay.
What other questions?
Can you remind me how to sign up for tomorrow's session? How much it is, and what is it the same time frame as today's and yesterday's?
It's the same time frame, and I will send you a link directly for tomorrow,
great.
and then you can sign up for it that way. Yeah.
I think I may as well just go ahead and get the whole shebang.
Awesome.
Thank you. This was great. No, this was really great. I do a lot of the same stuff, but you put some perspective on some different aspects.
Oh, good. Well, I would love to have your feedback too. So definitely, if you've got any ideas or things that we should do differently, I'm all ears. I love learning and collaborating. So.
Well, I think you've done more than collaborate on this one, and learning is it's just a good overview, refresher course kind of thing, and putting it all together is great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, you bet. You bet. Renata, any questions? Stacy?
No, another great course. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Well, guys, definitely. Oh, Renata? Did you
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You guys should have my email now. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. For those that are continuing on to the broker session tomorrow, I will see you tomorrow at the same time, same place. And keep an eye on your email in case I have more technological challenges and need to change the Zoom link.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And where can we see, you said you were going to share when you run your ads?
Yes, I will send those out with the files tonight. So I'll put, or tomorrow morning, I'll send them out tomorrow morning with the files that I send for the contractor agreement. I'll put in there screenshots of the targeting that I do for Facebook ads.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Because I'm curious to run my own and see if I get anyone.
It's a little crazy. It's fun.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You bet. Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Good night.